this kind of aligns with another episode when we talk about like each one teach one and all this stuff, where this information sharing is so important. Like I mentioned on the back end, like I'm a realtor on the side. So part of me wanting to get into real estate was just to have a deeper understanding of what the home buying process was like and all that. So I'm really into just sharing the information. It's not about telling people do this or don't do that, but it's really about saying, if you want to do this, you can do it. And here's how you do it, right? Like step-by-step meticulous information for the things that you can look, how can you find it, where can you get this information? Because there's a lot of barriers to progress for us as Black people, but information should not be one of them, because there's too much of us that are in the know already. So information should never be a barrier. So that's something that was very important. When we were looking in different areas, I think a lot of clients that I've worked with and a lot of people, they kind of go through the same journey, because we want to be fiscally responsible. We want to think about what is our monthly mortgage going to be like. And there's different reasons why people might buy a home. At a very high level, you might have people that are buying a home because they just want the home experience. Me, that was never an issue for me, because I grew up in an apartment my entire life. And that was what I was used to, just apartment living my entire life. Mom hitting the ceiling with the broom because people were making too much noise upstairs. So that's what I was used to. But some people want the home experience. They want the space because that's what they were used to. That's what they grew up in. And they just want that. And the cost is not necessarily as much of a factor for them, because it's not necessarily an investment vehicle primarily, and the financial gains from it is a byproduct of ownership, but it's not the point of ownership. So you have some people that are in that. Completely understand. You have some other people where it's, hey, how do I make the homeownership process as profitable as possible? So these are the people that will say, hey, my first home that I want to buy is going to be a multi-family. Maybe it's a 2-family, 3-family, or a 4-family. I'll live in one unit. I'll rent out 2 or 3 of the other units. And then at some point I'll move out, and then I'll buy a single family home while I'm renting out this other piece of property, or just keep on doing it. And then they just build their real estate portfolio. We thought about that for a period, right? We thought, because the first part, like, that didn't necessarily apply to us, because we were just used to living like in very tight spaces, right? With very limited space for us. So there's that. The second one, we started thinking about that, but then we started thinking about the process of actually being like landlords. And we were like, nah, I don't want to have to go through that process. And we've seen a lot of things happen recently with moratoriums and because a lot of times people think about like rent forgiveness, and I'm not gonna get into all those details, but a lot of people forget that it's not just these huge commercial buildings and like these huge developers that have homes. There are a lot of these people that have 2 or 3 family homes that are like literally need that rent to make a living. So we didn't want to have to deal with all of that. So then there's like the other side of it is, hey, we want to buy a home. We want to make a good investment. So what is the best single family investment that we could possibly make for ourselves? So we started to look at the different criteria. We started looking at like some different areas, and we really focused our search around public transportation, access to New York City. So as we were looking around a bunch of different cities, we realized like, hey, like the city that we're in right now just kept on popping up in all the searches. But then when we were like doing research, like a lot of people were like, hey, you don't necessarily want to live there. You don't want to live there. So we're like, okay, this is kind of like scaring us a little bit if everybody's saying you don't want to live there. But so then we were like, hey, let's go and drive. Let's go and check out the neighborhood ourselves. And being people that grew up around predominantly Black people, Hispanic people in this neighborhood, we're like, this is fine. We're like, this is no problem at all. Like, I'm good. I have no problem being around my people. Like, I grew up around my people, and I'm not in a rush to like run away from my people. We're good with this. So we ended up finding a house right before all like the prices started going up. We're literally a 5-minute walk away from the train station. The train station is a 25-minute train ride into New York City. And then we were able to get like a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house for like a pretty affordable price. And our mortgage is lower than a lot of people's rent is. So for us, that was what we did. But we didn't just hold that information in. We told a lot of people like, hey, like this city has a lot of really good houses. It's easy. You work in the city, it's easy access to New York City. There are a lot of these development plans that are in the works right now. Like if you're looking for a good place to buy an investment, like it has the potential to really expand, I think this would be a good city for you. And then people be like, that city? I think I'll pass. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is for one, and this is the controversial topic, and I think this would be a good thing for people to talk about and conversing in the comments, right? Like, is a lot of times as Black people, one, they're waiting to see a Starbucks in a place before they're willing to invest. So it's like, once they see a Starbucks, they're like, oh, they just built a Starbucks. Guess what? It's too late. It's too late, right? So that's one. Or you'll have some Black people where it's like, yo, I'm starting to see white people walk down this street, down that street. It's too late. It's too late. The word's out. They're already here. It's too late. Like, and everybody knows it and they know it. So it's kind of like we're telling these people that, hey, yeah, like this is actually like, there's a wide range of different types of Black people that live here. This could be a good opportunity for you. But as Shayeja said, a lot of the people that we're talking to were like running away from our neighborhood. And 3 years later, 4 years later, you have a bunch of people that are talking about like, yeah, I know people that are living here. I know people from the city there. The real estate prices are going way up here, but now there's conflict. You have a lot of people in the community that are upset with the prices going up. You have a lot of other people who are trying to buy houses and they literally put 10 bids on a house in the neighborhood and they can't get it. And it's kind of like, it's frustrating to me because I'm telling people, I'm like, guys, we were trying to express this to you before all this happened and you were running away and you would rather be in a place that enough white people were already living in, or there were already Starbucks that were there. And this is a lot of times how we think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because I feel like the same argument that Shayeja brought up about Brooklyn was the same thing that happened in Harlem, the same thing that happens in these neighborhoods, in predominantly Black neighborhoods all over, is because traditionally, like they talk about this in Miami too, in Little Haiti, and how Little Haiti's been gentrifying because of the sea level rising, and the fact that all of these waterfront homes that people were spending millions on they're gonna be flooded in a decade or two. So now all of those people are buying inland, and who's inland? All of the Black people that they forced back into these areas that aren't close to water, aren't close to review, aren't close to anything. But guess what? Those homes are secure. And I think that we found traditionally, because they ran freeways through Black neighborhoods happen to be right in the center of transportation for a lot of places. So now we're the key spot that people are looking at when they're looking to buy. People realized that the suburban sprawl, the fact that you needed a car to get to all of these neighborhoods, was exactly how they were intended, because Black people didn't have access to cars at that time when they were building these freeways in the 50s and 60s. So they intentionally did that to keep them out of those neighborhoods, because they don't have access. Like a couple towns over from us, there's a town that doesn't even have a train station for that specific reason. They were like, no, everybody who we want to live here will be able to get here, because they're gonna have cars. And now those same people that live in that town complain because they have to take a shuttle to our neighborhood to take the train, because we have 2 train stations here. So I think that there's a lot of value in many Black neighborhoods that other people see that we struggle to see. And I say we in general as Black people, not us, because obviously we made that decision to live here. But other people, when we try to explain the value of being in here, it goes back to the idea, like, if they don't see other white people here, it's sad to say that I feel like our people sometimes wait to see that it's okay. Because when you think about it, obviously the white people coming into, I remember when I was in college, I was working at a museum, and I was working with this guy who was white, and he was from Denver. And when I tell you, he's like really kind of uptight army guy, like just very, conservative, he seemed, and he moved to Bed-Stuy. And this was the time when I was like, Bed-Stuy. Like, I couldn't understand because I didn't know any white people at that time that were living in Bed-Stuy. I was like, wait, are you sure? And then I worked with another woman who was the same thing. Like the next year, like art student you would even expect. And I'm like, you live in Bed-Stuy? Oh, okay, interesting. And then like that was the start of it. Like years later, like Bed-Stuy, you could barely get in. Everybody, half the people there you feel like you see that live there are white. And it's interesting because they always have that foresight where they're like, yeah, this is close to where I want to be. I want to live here. And then they move and then they build the businesses that they want to see there. And they create the neighborhood that they want to live in. And then there's that clash with the people who existed there before them, not blending with the people who are now moving here because they're trying to insert themselves into this space. And I think as Black people, you know, because essentially we're gentrifiers too, right? Like we're not from this community, but we've come in. But I feel like it's different when as Black people who come in because you have an understanding of what it's like. So I feel like we come in at a different level and you can contribute. We contribute to the neighborhood. Not that a white person couldn't, but I think that we were very intentional when we came here that we didn't want to just exist and live in this house and not know our neighbors or not go to the community meetings. Like we were very active here. And the fact that we're able to kind of contribute in that way, I feel like is what Black people I want us to rally around and do. Like we need more people who are invested in the community, who they're moving in with the right intentions. Like they want to be part of a neighborhood. They're not moving in to kick anybody out. Like they're moving in to participate and to bring other people in. And I feel like that's what we need to get to as people, just encouraging more people to take a chance. Like we're not saying it's without faults and issues. I think there's going to be that no matter what area you're living in, there's going to be some opportunity cost that you have to deal with. But I think that the fact that we have an opportunity to participate in the community and engage with other people like us and hopefully empower, you know, it was interesting because we did a lot of work when we first moved in here and we've seen the house, you know, before they renovated it, before we moved in. And even when we did our projects to kind of beautify the space, it was a mess and it was like an eyesore. And the fact that like we could contribute to that. And just since we've been here, how many houses on our block have been fixed up? And new neighbors come in and they decorate during the seasons or they say hi, they engage. And it's just such a good feeling to have around you. And I feel like I want more of us to participate and to do that. And I feel like our neighborhoods wouldn't be such a scary thought of living in a Black neighborhood when you think, no, we're the same as any other neighborhood. We're a community. Like we know our neighbors. Our neighbor right here comes over every week. He'll take out our trash when we're gone for us. He does house projects for us. Like we're cool. And I feel like everybody should have the opportunity to experience that.
Yeah, I think something that you touch on, and tell me if I'm calling it the right thing. Is it like the broken glass test, or
broken windows?
Broken window, broken.
No,
something along those lines. But in any event, essentially, it's the theory of like basically saying that like if one house is broken down, then pretty soon, or if one house has like broken glass or broken windows or whatever, then the next house is soon going to have the same thing, right? It's like a ripple effect where if one house is broken down, dilapidated, then the next house is going to be broken down, dilapidated, so on and so forth. I'll look it up afterwards. The specific name of it doesn't necessarily matter, but that's the theory of it. But I also think that's the same thing on the beautification. When you have like one house that is being beautified and then that encourages other people to take care of their homes as well. So kind of thinking about like the idea of moving into these other cities, I think that part of it is like going as far as like a Levittown. I already said I couldn't necessarily do that. Would I be willing to move into a place where there aren't as many people that look like me if there were certain benefits? Yeah, I can say that I would, especially depending on school districts, so on and so forth, but there are a lot of decisions that go into it. But generally speaking, probably, especially if you're gonna be paying these taxes, so there's that. But I think the better question now is, what is it going to take to make our own cities and our own neighborhoods attractive to us? without needing to see a Starbucks here first, without needing to see white people here first? What is it going to take for our cities to be attractive to us to move? So when I'll pose that question to you. I have thoughts on it, but I'll pose that question to you.
I think we're starting to I think on affordability is making that a reality, because I think that we saw even during COVID, like even before COVID, we saw the amount of people coming from New York City coming here because they realized, like, oh, you actually could get space here. It's actually more affordable. I can't afford to pay any more rent than I'm already paying. And I think we started to notice that. But now that we're living in a time where housing, the housing availability is shrinking, the amount of people coming from other places, just internationally from other countries, like we're in a space now that like you don't really have an option. You can't just pick up and go wherever you feel like it. Like you're going to be competing for homes against everyone at this point if you're not getting in and buying at this point. So I feel like now it already is attractive. Like people's rents are going up hundreds of dollars in a single year, which is unheard of. But we're at a point where COVID has kind of driven that, and that's not going to shift. So at this point, people are like, hey, this might be my last chance. It's going to be cheaper for me to buy than to have to keep paying increasing rents. The instability of not knowing whether if you re-sign this lease this year, whether your landlord's just gonna hop and like raise the price again next year. So I feel like that's gonna kind of push more people that have already been considering buying into buying. And these neighborhoods are even with the price increase, like I won't say it, but our house increased significantly since we bought here 4 years ago. And if we would have moved, we could literally pick up today and we'd recoup all of our money and then some. But at the same time, it's like, where are we gonna go? Because every other area is even more expensive because their prices, the price of living in a mixed neighborhood or an all white neighborhood was just much more valuable, essentially, that those costs are unattainable for many people. So I think this is one of the last areas that you could still afford reasonably. So I think that, it's going to continue jumping.
Yeah. It's additionally, I think that's just, I guess, the systemic situation of homeownership, right? Where it's scarcity and there's just not enough inventory. Like we know that there's not enough inventory, and we actually were kind of lied to, because I think when we first bought this house, there were a lot of articles, and of course this is pre-COVID, so what was it, 2019 or something? So 2018 that we bought it. So, or no, we closed in 2017, moved in 2018, yeah.
But it was like December 31st. We closed on January 1st.
Okay. Something like that, right? But so yeah, in any event, when we did that, there were articles that were coming out, like, because mentally we made that decision. And then we'll talk about the strategy behind that whole decision and how we did that soon. But we were looking at it, and there were a bunch of articles coming out saying that our peers, our generation, like, we don't want to buy houses anymore. It's more valuable to be flexible and versatile and mobile and being able to pick up and move, and the costs associated with owning a home. And like the idea of homeownership is going to be a thing of the past and all this different stuff. But when you talk to anybody that's wealthy, like really wealthy, and hopefully we'll get there one day, like we're doing well enough, but hopefully we'll get to that point where we can say wealthy. When I talk to anybody that's wealthy, no wealthy person ever said, hey, don't own. Like, I've never heard a wealthy person say, hey, don't own. And that was kind of part of our decision to like just say, okay, we're seeing all these articles talking about don't own, be flexible, be mobile. And we said, no, like, real estate is tried and true. Like, that's what, and people say, that's why it's called real estate. It's real, it's there. So we just pushed for that. And that was something that happened for us, so we kind of lucked out. So circumstances have changed since then because of the pandemic, because of people realizing like, hey, I don't want to be stuck in a smaller apartment, and obviously we're talking with a very metro New York perspective on this whole thing. So there's that. But the thing is that there are non-systemic things that can make our neighborhoods more attractive as well, right? So the circumstance of COVID, the circumstance of the pandemic, the circumstance of low inventory, all of those circumstances have made it so that, yeah, people are gonna say, I'm forced to think about other areas because of how low the inventory is and how competitive the market is. But I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to change that. Like one of the things that, and we talk about, and this is not to speak poorly about like our neighborhood or anything like that, but this is like a reality of it, is the fact that like sometimes there's like a, how are we, even within our neighborhood, there's like this conflict between two different people with different perspectives on what the neighborhood means to them and what it should be. So, for example, I'll bring up like the minor situation where, and this is kind of a personal situation, but we want to be transparent as possible to be honest about it. Where like, I remember we came home one day, we were unloading the groceries, and there was a guy across the street just like wide open, just pissing wide open in the street. And I remember I was just like, okay, I don't know this man, I'm not gonna say nothing. And then you were like, what are you doing? Like you were holding him accountable, right? Like your own, like a black man, like you were holding him accountable. Like, yo, what are you doing in our city, right? Like this is our city. Like, why would you do that out in the open, right? Like that.
I had some pride. I said, to have some pride, for your neighborhood. I said,
yeah,
he was right in front of our neighbors who are elderly.
Yeah.
And you see them all out there all the time, raking and cleaning. They take care of their property. And I felt like it was disrespectful when I told them who lived there. I'm like, you're disrespecting their home. Like you're taking a piss. This isn't public. You're not homeless. This isn't a third world country. I don't understand why you feel like it's okay to just take a piss right here. And he couldn't explain it. Well, he tried to say, oh, I live right there. Like, oh, I just had to go really badly. I live right here. I live on the street. And I'm like, well, if you live right there, why didn't you just go into your house and pee there? Why are you peeing out here? And he couldn't even really answer. And I think they got defensive. And then obviously we got into an argument with him and his girlfriend. But it was sad because I had made a comment about you wouldn't go to the next town over, which is obviously wealthier. There are more white people there as well. And it was you wouldn't go there and do this. Like you would never, because that would be the same thing that would get you locked up if you go over to the next town. They wouldn't allow it. So why do you feel like it's acceptable here in your community, supposedly on the street you live? Why would you think that's okay? And I felt like they didn't even have a good response to it other than to get defensive. And then they made the comment about, yeah, we would do that. Like, this is whatever, like, this is this area, this is the neighborhood, get used to it. And I'm like, no, this is your perception of the neighborhood. And I think that was kind of what we noticed when we were doing the research before we bought here and why we drove around, because we wanted to get a vibe for how we felt being here. And we felt completely fine. And we have been completely fine. But just the fact that people who were responding, who were speaking about the neighborhood, weren't people who lived here. It was their perception. It was other people who were like, oh, that's the hood. Oh, I wouldn't go there. And I'm like, I don't see that though. When I come here, I'm like, this is, we've seen many areas of this town. Like there are areas that are rough parts, but then there's a lot of other areas where it's working class, well-to-do people who just want a safe place to raise their kids. They have gardens because we were active in the community garden here. And like a lot of the people we met through that program, we were like, wow, like they have full on gardens in their back. The Caribbean people, they're like, back in their country, everything they ate was homegrown. So you go there to their home, they have these beautiful gardens in the back that they take care of. They take care of their property, they respect it. And then it's unfortunate that there are certain people who don't think the same way, and that perception I think has kind of filtered out into other areas where their perception of what the neighborhood is completely different. It might have been like that maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but it's not like that now. But we're still fighting that narrative with people who are here who might be a little bit afraid of change and what's coming, or we're okay with the status quo and don't want more than what we should be valuing ourselves at here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, exactly, like the in that situation, the hardest part for me wasn't just that act, right? Which I'm like, come on. The hardest part for me was when his partner was like telling us, do you know where you live? Get used to it, right? Where it's almost like, hold on, that's the standard. Or the standard is like there, you be holding people accountable. Like I remember one time we're like literally driving, and then you saw like there was like somebody like around our age. We were driving like right down the street, and then they had like this entire bag of Wendy's, and they just like threw it on the floor, and you literally popped your head out the window. You're like, "Hell, what are you doing?" And then the person saw, and then they like picked it up.
They picked it up. Did they not pick it up?
You could have got it. You could have got a shot.
I don't know if I would do that now. I think it's changed, but
they
picked it up.
Yeah, you were like, yo, pick it up. And then even like, you know, personally, we have like, sometimes it's like just in the front of the house, we'll come home, and then it's like, we always will see like, we'll be picking up trash, or like our neighbors next door, they'll be picking up other people's trash and like doing all this stuff. So you have this group of people that's really into trying to keep our city clean and keep our city attractive and just take pride in something that is our own. And then you'll have a lot of people that don't necessarily care about taking pride in our own. And then it's kind of like, how can we expect other people to respect our city
and to respect us as people?
And to respect us as people if we collectively, one, aren't going to respect ourselves and our own stuff, or two, won't hold other people accountable for accepting all this stuff. And that's part of this thing that happens, and why people end up saying, hey, I would consider living in another neighborhood outside of a neighborhood that's Black, because that's what they're seeing. And it becomes this kind of like abrupt cycle. So that's what I'll say about that, in terms of we can make our own cities more attractive to us if we come together and hold each other accountable for it. But then there also has to be strategy to kind of like minimize some of the risk, whether it's like, hey, are we all gonna come together? Are we all going to participate in this? Like, how are we all gonna come together to make sure that like the school system is aligned, the city is aligned, the administration is aligned? How can we come together to do that? So that's another thing that we have to think about.
No, I think that to that point, one of the benefits, or one of the things that comes along, not necessarily like a benefit, but that comes along with homeownership, is you have a personal investment in that community. And if you're a renter and you're sort of transient, most renters, I don't think, are going around trashing the place, right? Like, you can go to places where it's heavily renter, and you don't have a second thought. When we were renters, it was the same thing. You might pass by trash, like, damn, that sucks. Like, why is there so much trash around? But you don't think twice about it. But then when you're an owner, when you're a homeowner, and your property value is attached to it, for something, you think differently about it. You think differently about maintaining your home, because that's your home. That there's a source of pride in like this being your property, and of course the value that's attached to it. You have a personal investment. So I feel like there's a benefit to homeownership, especially in a community like this. When you talk about predominantly Black cities, or you think of like the Detroits of the world, or even Philly to an extent, certain areas where there's more property than people. Like, there's a lot of vacant properties that you go back to the theory, the TBD named theory that you were talking about before, where you see a vacant home, then yeah, you're more than likely going to see a couple of them on the same block, because nobody wants to live next to a vacant home. Nobody wants to live next to a place that's not kept up. But you bring a homeowner in there that fixes up the place and now has pride in it. Other people that are around it are encouraged by that and say, hey, I wouldn't mind living there on that block. Like, it doesn't look too bad. Like, and that encourages more people to have investment in, because they see that their property value increased because you just fixed up your house. Now all of a sudden their house is more valuable. So then more other people are like, hey, you might want to take like a home improvement loan, since this house just sold for this much, when our house could sell for how much, they're going to take out a home loan and now improve their home. And it's just like a trickle effect. So I think that's the value of having more people investing in a neighborhood, in buying in a neighborhood, is that we have the ability to raise the value of a Black neighborhood.
And I'll leave it on that. As we always say, this is a platform where it's important to keep the conversation going. We hope that this conversation was beneficial for you. Make sure to have the conversation with your family, have a conversation with your friends. This is just our opinion. This is just our perspective. This is how we talk with each other. So join us in the comments. If y'all comment, we'll probably comment back and just rap with y'all, talk about your perspectives, whatever it is. But yeah, this has been the Do You Know Black Creators Kickback. I am Darnell.
And I'm ALYSSA.
Peace.